King Ashford Blackthorn had not smiled in 5 years. The nobles of Blackthorn Peak whispered about it in quiet corners, never loud enough for the guards to hear. They said his heart had turned to stone the day he took the throne. They said he had no mate, no family, nothing soft left inside him at all. They were wrong, but no one alive knew that except Ashford himself, and he had learned long ago to keep his pain locked behind a face made of iron. On the morning this story begins, the great hall of Blackthorn Peak was full. Nobles knelt in neat rows. Warriors stood along the stone walls, their eyes forward, their hands steady on their weapons. A delegation from a neighboring pack had come to settle a dispute over land near the northern river, and the air in the hall was thick with fear. Everyone knew the king's judgments were final. Everyone knew he did not forgive weakness. Ashford sat on his throne, with his chin resting on one fist, listening to the delegation leader stumble through an apology for trespassing on Blackthorn land. His voice, when he finally spoke, was flat and cold. "You knew the border. You crossed it anyway. Explain to me why I should not remove your pack from my lands entirely." The delegation leader's hands shook. No one in the hall breathed too loudly. This was the king they all knew, sharp, unmovable, untouchable. Then the great doors at the far end of the hall burst open. A small girl came running in. She could not have been older than 4 years old, with dark curls bouncing around her face and small boots slapping against the marble floor. She was laughing, the sound bright and completely out of place in that heavy, fearful room. A rich scent rolled off her, sweet and unmistakable, the scent of an omega, so pure and strong that every wolf in the hall lifted their head at once. Warriors who had stood perfectly still for the king's harshest judgments now turned, eyes wide, as the girl dodged between 2 startled guards and kept running, straight toward the throne. "Daddy!" The word rang out across the silent hall like a bell. Every noble froze. Every warrior's hand dropped from his weapon. No one moved, no one breathed, because the king of Blackthorn Peak, the man who had not shown a single soft feeling in 5 long years, was staring down at a small girl wrapping her arms around his leg, with an expression none of them had ever seen on his face before. Shock, disbelief, and then something else, something raw and unguarded, breaking through the stone like sunlight through a crack in a wall. Ashford knew that scent. He knew that face, the same curls, the same eyes, the same laugh he used to hear echo through a small cottage on the edge of the forest, 5 years ago, before everything fell apart. His breath caught in his throat. "Ren," he whispered. At the far end of the hall, standing frozen in the doorway, was a young woman with wide eyes and a face pale with panic. Ren, his mate, the one he had lost 5 years ago without a single word of explanation, the one he had searched for in every corner of his kingdom and found nothing, not a trace, not a whisper. She was here, breathless, one hand pressed to her chest, staring at him as though she could not believe her own daughter had just run across the hall and given away every secret she had spent years protecting. "Arya? No." Ren started forward, but it was too late. The little girl was already looking up at Ashford with the easy trust only a small child could have, completely unaware of the storm she had just caused. "Are you the king?" Arya asked him, tilting her head. "Mama said you were far away doing king things, but you look like the man in her picture." Ashford's throat tightened. He knelt down, right there in front of his entire court, right there in front of nobles who had spent years fearing him, and he lifted his daughter into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. His hands, the same hands that had signed orders for war, now trembled slightly as he held her. "I am the king," he said softly, his voice nothing like the cold, flat tone he had used moments before. "And you are the most important person who has ever walked into this hall." Arya giggled and patted his cheek with one small hand. "Mama cries sometimes when she looks at your picture. Are you going to make her stop crying?" A murmur rippled through the hall, quickly hushed. Ashford closed his eyes for a moment, holding his daughter close, before he stood, still cradling her against his chest, and turned his gaze to Ren. She had not moved from the doorway. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and there was fear in her eyes, not fear of him, exactly, but fear of what came next, fear of 5 years of secrets finally spilling out in front of every powerful wolf in the kingdom. "Clear the hall," Ashford said. His voice had returned to something commanding, though softer than before. "Everyone but my personal guard now." The nobles rose quickly and filed out, murmuring among themselves, casting glances back at the king, holding a small girl in his arms, as though the sight might vanish if they looked away too long. The delegation from the northern pack slipped out gratefully, forgetting entirely about the border dispute that had seemed so important only minutes ago. Within a few minutes, the great hall was empty, except for Ashford, Wren, Arya, and a handful of guards standing very still along the walls, doing their best not to appear as though they were listening. Ashford walked toward Wren slowly, still holding Arya, who had rested her head against his shoulder and begun humming quietly to herself, entirely unbothered by the tension around her. 5 years, Ashford said quietly, once he stood close enough that only Wren could hear him. 5 years, Wren. I searched every village, every forest, every hiding place I could think of. I thought you were dead. I thought someone had taken you from me. Wren's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from breaking down completely. "I couldn't come back," she whispered. "Ashford, I couldn't. Not with her." "Why?" The word came out rough, more pain in it than anger, though there was anger too, buried deep beneath years of grief he had never let himself fully feel. Wren took a shaking breath. "Because someone tried to kill me before I even had the chance to tell you I was carrying her. I was 3 months along. A woman came to the cottage while you were away at the border, and she wasn't there to talk. She said an Omega pup born to the Alpha King would be a target for the rest of her life. That every enemy pack, every rival for your throne, would want to use her against you. She said the only way to protect her was to make sure no one, not even you, knew she existed." Ashford's jaw tightened. "You should have told me. I would have protected you both." "I know that now," Wren said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But I was scared, and I was alone, and I didn't know who to trust. I ran because I thought I was protecting you as much as I was protecting her. I thought if no one knew where we were, no one could use us to hurt you, and no one could hurt her to get to you either." Arya lifted her head from her father's shoulder and looked between her parents with the simple concern of a child who did not fully understand the conversation, but knew something important was happening. "Mama, are you sad?" Wren wiped her eyes quickly and gave her daughter a small, trembling smile. "No, sweetheart. Mama's happy, I promise." Ashford reached out with his free hand and gently touched Wren's cheek, brushing away a tear with his thumb. It was a gesture so tender, so unlike the king his court believed him to be, that even the guards along the wall exchanged quiet, startled glances. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "Neither of you. Whoever threatened you 5 years ago will answer for it, but you will never have to run again. I swear that on my throne and on my life." Wren let out a breath that seemed to release 5 years of fear all at once. "I wanted to come back so many times," she admitted. "Every year on her birthday, I almost did. I just didn't know if it was safe. I didn't know if you'd still want you?" Ashford finished for her, his voice fierce now, though gentle at the same time. "Wren, I never stopped. Not for one single day." Arya, growing impatient with a conversation she could not fully follow, tugged on her father's collar. "Daddy, can I see the throne? Mama said it's really big and shiny." A sound came from Ashford's chest that the guards along the wall had never heard before, a real laugh, warm and unguarded, the kind of laugh that belonged to a man who had just been given back everything he thought he had lost. "Yes," he said, carrying her toward the throne. "You may sit on it, since one day it will be yours." "Mine?" Arya's eyes went wide with delight. "You are my daughter and my heir," Ashford said, settling her onto the great stone seat, where she looked impossibly small and impossibly important all at once. "There is no one else it could belong to." Wren watched the two of them with her hand pressed against her heart, tears still falling but her face bright with something like relief, something like hope she had not let herself feel in years. Ashford looked over Arya's head at her and extended his free hand. "Come here," he said softly. "Both of you belong beside this throne, not away from it." Wren crossed the hall slowly, as though she could hardly believe she was allowed to, and took his hand. He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders while Arya sat perched on the throne beside them, kicking her small feet happily and asking the guards nearby if they had ever fought a dragon. "There is something else you should know," Ashford said quietly to Ren, his voice serious again. "If someone threatened you 5 years ago because of who Arya's father is, that threat has not simply disappeared. I need to know everything you remember about that woman, her voice, anything she said. We will find out who sent her, and we will make certain neither of you is ever in danger again." Ren nodded, steadier now with his arm around her. "I remember more than I ever told anyone. I was too afraid to speak of it to a single soul, all these years, but I can tell you everything now." "Good," Ashford said, "because from this day forward, nothing about our family will be hidden, not from my court, and not from whoever thought they could tear us apart." That evening, word spread through every corner of Blackthorn Peak of what had happened in the Great Hall. How the fearsome Alpha King, the man no one had ever seen soften, had knelt on the marble floor in front of his entire court to embrace a small Omega girl who called him Daddy. The story traveled from the palace kitchens to the training grounds to the farthest villages within a single day, and by nightfall, the whole kingdom knew that their king, for all his cold reputation, had a heart after all, one that had simply been waiting, patiently and painfully, for his family to come home. In the palace nursery that night, freshly prepared for its first true occupant, Ashford sat on the edge of a small bed and watched his daughter's eyes grow heavy with sleep. Ren stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching the two of them with a peace on her face she had not felt in 5 long years. "I missed so much," Ashford murmured, brushing a curl away from Arya's forehead as she drifted off. Her first steps, her first words. 4 years I will never get back." "You have all the years still ahead," Ren said softly, coming to sit beside him. "That has to be enough for now." Ashford took her hand and held it gently. "It will be more than enough," he said, "as long as neither of you ever has to run from me again." Arya stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring the word Daddy once more, before settling into a peaceful rest, safe for the first time in her short life within the walls of a kingdom that finally knew exactly who she was, and exactly how deeply, despite every rumor and every fear whispered about him, the Alpha King was capable of loving. Outside the nursery window, the moon rose high over Blackthorn Peak, and for the first time in 5 years, King Ashford Blackthorn felt something in his chest that was not cold at all. It was warm, and full, and entirely, unmistakably his own family, finally home.